Takže všetkých vítam
weekend camp meeting.
Na tomto camp meetingu.
I want to begin by attempting to answer a few questions that I've received.
Chcel by som začať s tým, že odpoviem na niektoré otázky, ktoré som dostal.
So I don't normally do this to put people on the spot.
Väčšinou to takto nerobím hneď, akože, jak to príde.
But someone asked me a question about Catherine's presentation yesterday.
Niekto sa ma spýtal otázku ohľadne prezentácie od Catherine, čo mala včera.
I'm just going to ask her now. She didn't know.
Tak sa jej spýtam teraz, ona o tom nevie.
So you probably won't be able to hear her, so I'm just going to repeat what she says, if she says anything.
Takže vy ju nebudete počuť, ja zopakujem, čo ona povedala, ak teda odpovie.
So I've been in what I might describe as a long-term conversation.
Bol som v takej dlhodobej konverzácii
with a friend in the movement.
S priateľom v hnutí alebo priateľkou.
And it's about Panium.
Ohľadne Pánia.
So I know lots of people are talking about Panium.
Viem, že mnoho ľudí hovorí o Pániu.
And Catherine mentioned it yesterday in her presentation.
A Katrin to včera v tej prezentácii spomenula.
So for quite some time now, we have understood Panium to be 2021.
Takže už nejaký čas sme rozumeli tomu, že Pánium je 2021.
I just want to remind everybody that the discussion or the subject of Panium is not new, it's an old subject.
Chcel by som všetkým pripomenúť, že tá téma Pánia to nie je niečo nové, to už je stará téma.
It's been on our radar for 6 years.
Vieme o tom už 6 rokov.
And Elder Tess was not the first person to bring that, we'll call it a battle, bring that battle to our understanding.
Ona nebola prvá, ktorá túto bitku priniesla k nášmu porozumeniu.
Just a general comment.
Taký všeobecný komentár.
I think many of us have either forgotten or have got into a habit of not reviewing old material.
Mnohí z nás upadli do takého zvyku, že si neopakujeme tie staré štúdie a ešte k tomu.
A lot of the older material, when people left the movement, they took their material with them.
Mnoho vlastne toho materiálu, keď ľudia odišli z hnutia, zobrali si ho so sebou.
So this is just an admonition or an encouragement that we should be reviewing older material.
To vás chcem povzbudiť, že tie staré veci by sme si mali zopakovať.
So Panium, I suspect the majority of us.
Takže väčšina z nás ohľadne Pánia
understand it to be an information war.
Rozumejú tomu tak, že to je informačná vojna.
And I think most of us have got some level of understanding that it's connected with the war in Ukraine.
A väčšina z nás má nejaké také porozumenie, že je to spojené s vojnou na Ukrajine.
And it's not a straightforward subject, plus we haven't been very precise in our language in the past.
Nie je to veľmi jasná téma a my sme v tom našom pomenovaní, tom jazyku neboli úplne taký konkrétny, presný.
But the concept of information war,
ale ten koncept informačnej vojny,
cold wars,
a studených vojen,
and hot wars
a horúcich vojen,
are terms that we use, but I think aren't well understood.
Sú veci, ktoré používame, ale nie sú dobre pochopené.
So I'm going to simplify the question.
Takže zjednoduším tú otázku.
Are we still in Panium?
Sme stále ešte v čase Pánia?
is the information war that began in 2021.
Tá informačná vojna, ktorá začala v 2021,
Are we still in that information war?
sme ešte stále v tej informačnej vojne?
And is the war in Ukraine panium
Je vojna na Ukrajine panium?
or something else?
Alebo je to niečo iné?
Catherine, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you did mention some of those aspects.
Katrín, chceš nám niečo k tomu povedať, lebo tieto veci si nespomínala?
In 2021 exclusive.
Go ahead.
In my mind, 2021 Panium is behind us, that waymark.
Okay, so Catherine believes that the waymark of Panium has come to its end. And
Takže Katrín
Go ahead.
verí, že ten milník toho Pania už prišiel k svojmu koncu.
and when did it end? It ended in 2021? Or spilled over into 22?
It might have spilled into 2022, early 2022.
So the question is, when did Panium end?
Takže otázka je, kedy to Panium skončilo?
And she has said it spilled into early 2022.
A ona povedala, že to vlastne ako keby tak sa prelialo do
Is
raného
that
času
before February, the
2022.
invasion?
To bolo ešte pred februárom, pred tou inváziou? Áno.
She believes it ended before the invasion began.
Čiže ona verí, že Panium skončil predtým, ako začala tá invázia.
You want to add anything else?
Ešte niečo?
I think that there would be a progressive fall for Russia over that dispensation between 2021 and Sunday, or so the continuation of the war in Ukraine I see as that intermediate period.
So she recognizes that
Ale uvedomuje si,
the king of the south would fall,
že kráľ juhu padne
from 2021 Panium to the Sunday law.
Medzi 2021 až po nedeľný zákon.
But the history that we're now in
Ale tie dejiny, v ktorých sme teraz,
is not Panium.
to nie je Panium.
What would you say that it is?
A čo by si povedala, čo to je?
I set a dot of the line about 2/3 of the way along, but I'm not sure why I do that.
I'm going to reframe my question.
Tak skúsim tú otázku ináč položiť.
Does it have a historical precedence or history that we could identify it with a name or something? What history are we in if we're past Panium?
We could line it up with the period from, we can line it up with 1989 to 1991.
Past history.
Má to nejaké
Like Panium
dejiny,
is
s
a
ktorými to
historical
môžeme dať
event.
do
Is there a
linie?
history that we're going to go to find out where we are now?
Máme nejaké dejiny, do ktorých pôjdeme, aby sme zistili, že kde sa teraz nachádzame?
So Catherine said that she doesn't know a historical story to
Katrin hovorí, že nevie
explain where we are now.
ten príbeh toho, aby vysvetlila, že kde sme teraz, ako dejinný príbeh.
But in our own history,
V našich vlastných dejinách
it's a repeat of
je to opakovanie,
it's
1989 to 1990.
it's a repeat of 1989 to 1991.
1989 až
89 to 91.
až 1991.
And Catherine, what is that?
A to je čo?
So she's lining up the fall of
To je
the
pád
USSR from
Sovietskeho
89 to
zväzu
91 with our current
a to
history.
dáva do linie s tými našimi dejinami.
that correct?
Je to správne?
And Catherine's lining that up with
Ona to dáva do linie
1989
s 89.
to 1991.
až 91.
Is that correct?
Je to tak správne?
And she says, this is Parminder.
Ona hovorí, toto je Pán Jung.
It's the year, but it's the point.
Je to celý rok, ale je to jeden bod.
And this history here
A tieto dejiny tu
is the progressive fall of the king of the south.
je postupný pád kráľa juhu.
Okay, so I hope that answers that person's question.
Dúfam, že to zodpovedá otázku toho človeka.
Okay, so I was just reading what the questioner had said
Som si
after
tú
that.
otázku ešte.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question, and they might come back.
Takže snad to stačilo ako odpoveď, alebo keď tak ešte sa vráťte naspäť a spýtajte.
Okay, so I had another question.
Mal som ešte ďalšiu otázku.
This is on Acts 27,
Ohľadne skutkov 27.
the island of Melita.
Tam je ten ostrov Melita.
What island is Melita?
To je ktorý ostrov?
Malta. So everyone here knew it was Malta.
Pardon, Malta. Uh-huh.
So Paul is on the island of Malta,
Takže Pavol je na tom ostrove Malta.
and I don't know if the question is connected to the presentation that was done yesterday,
Neviem, či tá otázka je spojená s prezentáciou, ktorú sme robili včera,
or to some of the thoughts and ideas that I've introduced in the recent past.
alebo je to spojené s nejakými myšlienkami, ktoré som v nedávnej minulosti priviedol.
So we all know that Paul becomes famous in Malta.
Vieme, že Pavol sa stal takým známym na tej Malte.
So I'm not going to go to the verses because I think we're very familiar with that story.
Tie verše poznáme, teda ten príbeh poznáme, nejdem do tých veršov.
Certain things happen in that story.
Určité veci sa tam stali v tom príbehu.
There's the snake,
Je tam had
and then there's the Roman governor's father.
a je tam otec toho rímskeho vládcu.
I think his name is Publius. It's Publius's father who gets healed.
Myslím, že to bol Publiov otec, ktorý bol uzdravený.
And those two events propel Paul to fame.
A tieto dve udalosti vlastne viedli k takej presláveniu toho Pavla.
And we have taught that the arrival on the island is what waymark.
A čo sme učili, že príchod na ostrov je vlastne ktorý milník?
I can't hear. Who's speaking? I didn't hear what they said. Sunday law. Sunday law. So we've taught that that's Sunday law.
Učili sme, že je to nedeľný zákon.
And the questioner understands that.
A tomu ten, ktorý sa pýta, rozumie.
So you can guess what the question is.
Tak hádajte, aká je tá otázka.
Based upon Catherine's studies and comments that I've made in the past.
Na základe tých štúdií od Catherine a tých komentárov, ktoré som hovoril v minulosti.
And those on Zoom, what you're not aware of is the discussions that we had after her studies here at camp.
My tu máme stretnutie, my sme sa potom jej štúdiu veľa rozprávali, to vy vlastne o tom neviete. Mali diskusiu.
It didn't answer that question, but there was some discussion around that subject.
A nebola to odpoveď na tú otázku, ale bola tam diskusia.
So the questioner
toho.
is asking the following.
Takže ten človek sa pýta toto.
Can you hear me okay?
Počujeme sa?
Can you hear me now? Sorry. So the questioner understands that and he's asking the following.
Takže ten človek k tomu rozumie a pýta sa
I'm going to quote
následovne.
him.
Budem ho citovať.
Knowing that at the Sunday law going forward,
Takže keď pri nedeľnom zákone máme ísť vpred,
we're supposed to interact with the Nethinims,
mali by sme mať interakciu s netinejcami.
and he's basing that on Acts 27
Zaklada to na
or
skutkoch
into
27
28.
až do 28. kapitoly.
What does that look like in our time?
Ako to vyzerá v našom čase?
So what does it look like, the interaction that we have with the Nethinims?
Ako vyzerá tá interakcia, ktorú my máme s netinejcami?
So if we compare Acts 27, we are whom in that story?
My sme vlastne kto v tom príbehu so skutkov 27?
So everybody here said Paul,
Všetci tu, čo sedíme, povedali Pavol.
and the Nethinims are whom?
A netinejci sú kto?
The islanders, the people
Tí
from Malta who
ostrovania,
live there.
ktorí tam žijú na tom ostrove.
Okay, so I'm going to ask maybe two people here.
Spýtam sa dvoch ľudí,
What they make of that story,
čo oni z toho príbehu urobili,
what they understood or what they think they understood that
Myslia,
Catherine was teaching yesterday,
že pochopili z toho, čo Catherine včera učila.
and what they think they've heard me say in the past.
A čo si myslia, že som ja povedal v minulosti?
So there are three stories, if you like.
Takže máme tu tri príbehy.
Acts, Catherine, me.
Skutky, Katrin a ja.
I'm only using Catherine because it's topical when we're at this camp meeting. I'm not trying to pick on her study or do anything negative.
Ja nemyslím nič negatívne o jej štúdii, len sa to týka tohto camp meetingu, preto hovorím o nej.
And we all have our own ideas anyway, I think.
Každý z nás má nejaké svoje myšlienky.
Okay, so one volunteer to put their hand up. Okay, so Curtis is going to go first.
Takže Curtis.
So the question is,
Otázka je,
we've got Acts 27,
máme skutky 27,
where Paul is literally famous
kde naozaj Pavol je doslovne známy, slávny,
because of his good works.
kvôli jeho dobrým skutkom.
What does that mean for us today, Curtis?
To pre nás vyzerá dnes, Curtis.
If we take the three separate stories,
Go ahead.
if we take the three separate stories that we could know,
So if we take those three stories,
Keď vezmeme tieto tri príbehy,
all going to fame in Acts 27,
when Paul becomes famous in Acts 27,
keď sa Pavol stane slávnym v skutkoch 27,
he's giving something to the Maltesians that they don't have.
he's going to give something to the people of Malta that they don't have.
On tým Malťanom dá niečo, čo oni nemajú.
In the study that Catherine did yesterday,
In the study that was done yesterday by Catherine,
V tej štúdii, ktorú Katrin robila včera,
there's an element that this movement gives the Nephilims that they don't have, if that's the conclusion that we draw from that.
so Curtis has drawn the conclusion that there is something that we will give the Nephilims.
takže Curtis z toho berie taký záver, že my niečo dáme tým netinejcom, čo oni nemajú.
In those two literal histories, because Catherine used the 1850s history and Acts 27, that's literally going to them and giving them those truths.
So in yesterday's study, we know that Catherine spoke of the 1850 history.
Katrin hovorila o tých dejinách 1850
And if we layer that on to Acts 27,
a keď to vlastne dáme do linie so skutkami 27,
in both stories, God's people literally go or are required to go to the world.
v obidvoch prípadoch Boží ľud ide do sveta.
And the marker that she used for that was the 1850 chart.
A ona na to použila vlastne ten milník tej tabulky 1850.
The third component, which is what you've taught,
So the third part
A tá tretia
that I've
časť,
intimated
to je to, čo ja som k tomu pridal,
is that our relationship with the Levites and the Nephilims is not physical and literal.
So I've suggested that our relationship with the Nephilims is not literal. That's what
ja som
Curtis has
povedal,
said.
že ten náš vzťah s netinejcami nie je doslovný.
So while we have two literal missionary works being done, and what I understand your past teachings is that the relationship with the Nephilims is a spiritual relationship. So whatever that looks like doesn't look like these literal works that are being done.
So Curtis understands
Curtis tomu rozumie tak,
that in the book of Acts
že v
and in 1850,
knihe skutkov a v roku 1850
there was literal evangelism going on.
tu sa diala doslovná evanjelizácia.
And he says that today,
A on hovorí, že dnes,
in the future, in the Sunday law, of course,
v budúcnosti nedeľného zákona,
there's not going to be literal evangelism, there's going to be spiritual evangelism.
nebude doslovná evangelizácia, ale duchovná.
So it's a spiritual manifestation of those histories.
Taký duchovný prejav týchto dejín.
And what does that mean?
A čo to znamená?
We're not specifically having physical contact with them, giving them a message.
We're not going to have contact with them,
Rozumie tomu tak, že my nebudeme s nimi mať kontakt,
Or whatever message they are getting from God is coming externally. Is not coming from us.
so they will be evangelized,
čiže oni budú evangelizovaní,
not by us,
ale nie nami,
but by a message that originates from God.
ale posolstvom, ktoré pochádza od Boha.
Okay, so in summary,
Takže aby som to zhrnul,
one of our members here believes the following:
jeden z členov, ktorých tu máme, verí takto.
that despite the 1850 history and the book of Acts history,
Napriek tým dejinám 1850 a skutkom 27,
we won't be doing evangelism to the Nephilims,
nebudeme robiť evangelizáciu k netinejcom,
but they will be receiving a message
ale oni príjmu posolstvo
from God
od Boha,
without defining what that means.
Bez toho, že by sme teraz definovali, čo to znamená,
It's the test,
je to tá skúška,
but it's not going to come from us.
ale nepríde to od nás.
And so the inference or the suggestion is
Takže ten návrh je,
that it will come from an external source, which would essentially be the world.
príde z vonkajšieho zdroja zo sveta.
Is that fair representation? He agrees with that.
S tým takto súhlasí Curtis.
Anyone else wants to say something?
Ešte niekto niečo chce k tomu dodať?
Brian.
That other than what Curtis is saying, if that's not what's going to happen, God's going to have to empower us to do some great thing that's going to attract attention to the messages.
So Brian has said
Brian hovorí,
that if Curtis is wrong,
že ak Curtis toto chápe nesprávne,
then the book of Acts will have to be literally fulfilled.
tak skutky by sa museli naplniť doslovne.
In some fashion we have to become famous,
A my sa nejako musíme stať slávnymi
and so we become the center of attention.
a centre pozornosti.
And obviously that's based on an Acts 27 model.
To je z toho modelu skutky 27.
And even though Brian didn't say that,
A Brian, aj keď to nepovedal,
sorry, say the following, not the
Yeah.
past.
teraz to, čo poviem,
This is exactly the same model that Ellen White provides.
toto je presne ten istý model, ktorý nám dáva Ellen Whiteová.
She suggests that we will be projected into the national discussion.
Ona hovorí, že my budeme vlastne posunutí do medzinárodnej diskusie.
You can go to the
národnej.
1890s to get evidence for that.
A na to vidíme dôkaz v rokoch 1890.
Right?
Nie medzinárodnej, ale národnej
Anything else?
diskusie.
So I just want to ask Brian, which one do you favor?
Ja sa pýtam Briana, ktorý z týchto dvoch modelov ty
So he
preferuješ?
believes that some event is going to happen
Takže on verí, že sa udeje nejaká udalosť,
that will make us famous,
ktorá nás urobí slávnymi.
and the public will know who we are,
A verejnosť bude vedieť, kto my sme.
and we'll have a platform to share our message with the world.
A budeme mať nejakú platformu na to, aby sme zdieľali naše posolstvo so svetom.
So if I can frame it this way,
Ak to môžem takto zaramcovať.
without defining what those circumstances are,
Bez toho, aby sme definovali, aké to okolnosti budú, alebo sú,
one of our members says that the movement standard or traditional teaching on the Sunday law is correct.
jeden z našich členov hovorí, že to pôvodné porozumenie nedeľného zákona, taký ten štandardný pohľad je správny.
Is that fair representation?
Dobre som to povedal?
So in our little group here,
Takže tu na tejto našej malej skupinke
we have differing views on what the future looks like.
máme rôzne pohľady na to, čo prinesie budúcnosť.
Brian, did you have that understanding before yesterday?
Mal si toto porozumenie aj pred včerajškom?
I've always
Brian?
expressed that we have to be able to be outstanding in the world to get this message across. Otherwise, then it's going to have to be the way Curtis has projected it.
So I hope everybody on Zoom understands that I'm rephrasing people's responses.
Dúfam, že chápete na Zoome, že ja vlastne, ľudia sa tu niečo pýtajú a ja to len parafrazujem, čo sa pýtajú. Alebo
So Brian has said
odpovedajú.
he's never let go of the old ways.
Takže Brian hovorí, že on nikdy vlastne sa nepustil toho starého vysvetlenia
And embraced these new ideas.
a neprijal tieto nové myšlienky.
Anyone else?
Ešte niekto?
No thoughts? Shy?
Is there a third way, middle way,
Start again, sorry.
is there a third or middle way where a representation of the character is represented by a group of people?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Someone did something to my Zoom.
Is there a third way? So in between, where a group of people are used as a representation of the people who will be saved. And they do some evangelism, but most of it is spiritual. But that is the physical evangelism will be done by a small group, but it's a representation of what broadly happens.
Before I get that translated,
Predtým, ako vám to preložím, čo sa ešte tu hovorí v skupinke,
that small group, you're talking about us. So the question is,
tá otázka je,
or suggestion,
alebo návrh,
Curtis says that none of us do a work for the Nethinims.
Curtis hovorí, že nikto z nás nebude robiť prácu pre Netinejcov.
Brian says that all of us as a movement do a work for the Nethinims.
Brian hovorí, že všetci ako celé hnutie budeme robiť dielo pre Netinejcov.
And Courtney has suggested,
A Colden hovorí,
Courtney, sorry, yes,
pardon,
that maybe only a few of us do this work.
že možno len pár ľudí z nás urobí túto prácu.
So I just want to ask you, Courtney, just a short response. Those few people who do that work,
Takže týchto pár ľudí, ktorí robia to dielo,
are they sent or are they independent workers?
sú poslaní alebo sú to nejakí nezávislí pracovníci?
Independent work.
Nezávislí.
He said that they're independent workers.
Povedal, že sú to nezávislí pracovníci.
Okay, so I want to comment now on that.
Tak na toto by som chcel komentovať.
And I have taught, suggested,
Ja som učil, ten môj návrh bol,
mostly in private, not so much in public, say, perhaps.
väčšinou asi v súkromí, nie až tak verejne,
But if you go and do an independent work,
že keď idete do tej nezávislej práce,
you're not representing a movement.
nereprezentujete hnutie.
So I don't think that would qualify.
Takže toto by sa nemohlo kvalifikovať.
What we have to be careful about
Ohľadom čoho musíme byť opatrní,
is reading Paul's history,
je čítanie dejín, ktoré prežil Pavol.
because in many ways he's an independent atom,
On je mnohými spôsobmi vlastne taký nezávislý atóm,
but we treat him as a representative of the movement back then.
ale my s ním zaobchádzame ako s reprezentantom hnutia, ktoré bolo vtedy.
Okay, Catherine, do you have any thoughts?
Katrín, máš ešte nejaké myšlienky?
Thoughts about what it looks like going to the Netherlands?
So the question is, we've got stories, literal stories, that give this idea that we go to the world.
My máme tie doslovné príbehy, ktoré nám dávajú tú myšlienku toho, že ideme ku svetu, že pôjdeme do sveta.
And we've built a whole theology,
A vybudovali sme celú teológiu,
a doctrine,
učenie,
that we are at the center of the great controversy during the Sunday law history.
toho, že my sme v centre veľkého sporu v dejinách nedeľného zákona.
And it's built upon these stories and similar ones.
A je to vybudované na takýchto príbehoch a iných ešte podobných.
Curtis said that version is no longer fit for purpose.
Curtis hovorí, že toto už tak nebude, táto verzia.
Brian said it's still correct, it's still sound.
A Brian hovorí, že je to stále správne.
And that's my question, Catherine.
My expectation has been that we will do work on behalf of the movement, but in our personal spheres of influence.
So Catherine's response
A Katrin odpovedá,
was similar to Courtney's.
podobne ako Curtis,
That
alebo Courtney,
each of us will
Že-
just do the work that lies nearest,
že každý z nás bude robiť to dielo, ktoré je v našom najbližšom okolí.
a personal independent work.
Je to taká osobná nezávislá práca.
Is that fair representation?
By independent, are you saying it's not part of the movement?
So I'm going to define what independent means.
Takže popíšem, čo tým myslím, keď hovorím nezávislá.
Whoever we want to define leadership as,
Akokoľvek by sme teraz definovali vedenie,
whether it's me, a continental leader or a ministry leader,
či som to ja, alebo ten kontinentálny vodca, alebo vodca služobnosti,
they have not explicitly sent you out to do something or speak to people.
oni vás nejak explicitne neposlali, že choďte von a hovorte.
There's no coordination,
Nie je tu žiadna koordinácia,
there's no organization.
organizácia.
It's just an individual member of the movement deciding that they need to speak at some moment to somebody.
To len sa tak nezávisle tí členovia rozhodnú, že v určitej chvíli chcú k niekomu prehovoriť o niečom.
That's what I mean by independent.
Týmto myslím slovo nezávislý.
The view that I had, that's the view that I had, although it doesn't sound very good now that you've said what you said.
I want to add that I don't mean to put a negative connotation to that.
Ja toto nevnímam nejako negatívne. To by som chcel k tomu pridať.
Because she and others are nervous that they're acting rebelliously.
Lebo ona teraz sa znervoznila, že ona alebo iní sú vlastne v rebelii.
And when I've discussed this subject in the past, this particular issue,
Keď som túto tému rozoberal v minulosti,
I think some people have had their zeal chilled, if I can say it that way,
niektorým sa tak tá húževnatosť ako keby
because there's a
zmenšila,
misunderstanding of what this issue would mean.
lebo je neporozumenie toho, že čo to znamená.
So I'm not suggesting that an independent work is wrong or bad or rebellious.
Čiže ja nehovorím, že tá nezávislá práca je zlá, nesprávna alebo nejaká rebelantská,
But I am suggesting it doesn't fit the criteria of a movement-led initiative.
ale nesedí to na to kritérium, že vedie to hnutie, že je to iniciatíva hnutia.
So, did you want to respond?
You didn't, that's the view that I held up until now, and yeah, I don't know, the way I was seeing it was how you described it, so then.
Okay, so no more comment. She's
Dobre.
happy-ish.
Tomu nie je ďalší komentár.
So,
Ešte niekto sa hlási?
I think I agree with the previous speakers' thoughts. I feel that obviously I've got a lot less knowledge on the movement in general. I feel some of the problems may come with accountability, in that owning the act of being independent gives us accountability. So which is why we probably shy away from the idea of being independent. But I do agree that for example, I feel I am one of the testimonies of the spoken word of the movement. So whilst we may not be acting, we may not think that we're acting on a majority, we are talking and influencing our circles. We are talking and spreading.
Teraz tam niekto hovorí v skupinke, Parminder to potom zreprodukuje.
We are still spreading a word out there, even if it's not on a grand scale.
Okay, so that was more of a testimony than a question, I think.
Takže teraz tu bolo skôr také svedectvo ako
And it's
otázka.
reiterating the point
A to je tam je ten bod,
there is no negativity, certainly not in my mind, when people go ahead and are moved by the Holy Spirit to speak to people.
že ja určite nemám v mysli nič negatívne o tom, keď ľudia sú pohnutí Duchom Svätým a hovoria s druhými.
That fair representation?
To je
Yeah,
to, čo si chcela povedať.
What I do want to disagree with what you said
S čím ja chcem nesúhlasiť v tej veci, čo ty si povedala,
is that's not what Brian said, I don't think.
to nie je to, čo povedal Brian.
He spoke. Sorry.
Sorry, because I couldn't say being in the middle.
Oh, Courtney, I thought you said.
No, I did.
Okay. Okay, so I won't comment anymore then. That's fine. Any other thoughts?
Tak nejak si to tam vyjasnili, že nie, nejde už na to komentovať.
Can I just clarify that that's what everyone's been doing all along? So that's no different when we get to Sunday Law and our cry than what we've been doing all along. If we go with that.
Yes, I'll try and repeat everybody's thing. So we're talking about the Sunday Law and what it looks like.
Takže hovoríme o tom, o nedeľnom zákone a o tom, ako má vyzerať.
And I'm going to stick to that term, doing an independent work.
A chcem sa držať tohto pojmu, že robiť nejakú nezávislú prácu.
I'll add another way of expressing it, a personal work. That may
Alebo
be
keby sme to inak povedali, je to
offensive.
taká osobná práca, osobná činnosť.
I wasn't trying to be offensive when I said independent, because I think it is an important concept to understand.
Je dôležité porozumieť, že ja som tým nemyslel nič také útočné, že keď je niekto nezávislý.
I'll give an example.
Dám príklad.
This movement,
Toto,
right from its inception,
toto hnutie od svojho zrodu,
when we went to Daniel chapter 12,
keď sme išli do Daniela 12,
we defined the wise as what?
definovali sme to múdre ako čo?
As teachers. Someone has said as teachers.
Ako učiteľov, tých múdrych ako
And
učiteľov.
following that idea about teachers, all of us are wise.
Keď ideme teraz podľa tejto myšlienky tých učiteľov, tak všetci z nás sú múdri.
We developed another model
A vyvinuli sme ďalší model,
that says we're all priests.
ktorý hovorí, že sme kňazi všetci.
And what's the primary role of a priest?
Aká je hlavná úloha kňaza?
It's not someone who does sacrifices, it's a teacher, someone has just said.
To je niekto, kto učí, nie niekto, kto robí obete. To je jeho hlavná rola.
So based upon that model,
Takže na základe tohto modelu
we have had a culture
máme kultúru,
which has not worked well,
ktorá nefungovala dobre,
because I'm just going to say all of you, generally, not just here, but on video,
všetci z vás, tuto všeobecne,
want to work.
chcú pracovať
And what word am I going to use now? Independently.
nezávisle.
You don't want to do as you're told.
Nechcete robiť tak, ako vám niekto povie.
Because you see it that Some leader somewhere is randomly bossing you around and telling you what to do.
Lebo to vnímate, ako keby nejaký vodca vám rozkazoval a vám ako keby vás dirigoval.
And so the subject is about teaching.
Takže tá téma je ohľadne učenia.
And people will come up with all manner, I'm going to call them excuses.
A ľudia prídu so všetkými možnými druhmi výhovoriek.
I'm shy, I don't understand things. You can fill in whatever you want.
Typu, ja som hamblivý, alebo ja veciam nerozumiem, môžete si tam doplniť kadečo.
But those leaders never set the rules.
Ale tí vodcovia nikdy neurčili nejaké pravidlá.
This is not a human being pushing people around.
Toto nie je nejaký človek, ktorý núti ľudí niečo robiť.
It's a theology, an ideology based upon a Bible passage or a Bible concept.
To je taká teológia založená na biblickom koncepte.
And when you qualify as a priest, literally in the house of Aaron,
keď by ste doslovne boli v dome Árona a boli by ste kvalifikovaní pre kňazstvo.
when it's your roster, in the time of Christ, the priesthood was rostered on, we'll say on a monthly basis.
Bola tam určitý...
You don't tell people, I'm not available.
Proste oni sa striedali a v určitých časových intervaloch mali svoju službu.
You lose your job.
A nemohli ste povedať, že ja nemôžem.
But this movement is full of independent workers.
Ale toto hnutie, tu sú nezávislí pracovníci,
who think they have a right
ktorí si
to be
myslia,
independent
že
because they think it's of leadership, but it's really of God and their job function.
Oni si myslia, že majú právo byť nezávislí, lebo to považujú, že to ide z vedenia, ale ono to v skutočnosti ide od Boha, to je ich úloha, je to ich rola.
This is not a telling off session about teaching.
Teraz,
it's a parable.
To je podobenstvo, to sa vás nesnažím teraz tu hrešiť ohľadne učenia.
When we're required to teach, every single one of us, it's not some kind of organizational issue.
Každý jeden z nás má učiť. Toto nie je nejaká organizačná téma.
It's a prophetic matter.
To je prorocká záležitosť.
And so when I said people are doing an independent missionary work,
takže keď som povedal, že ľudia robia nezávislú misionárskú prácu,
all of you have got your lives, you've got your personalities.
Každý z vás máte svoj život, máte svoje osobnosti.
And you've got legitimate reasons not to teach when you're asked to.
A máte nejaké legitímne dôvody neučiť, keď sa to od vás žiada.
And whilst we're all free to teach when we want, if we want, when we want, if we want.
A tak my potom učíme len vtedy, keď chceme. A
we're all
ak
free
chceme,
to teach if we want, when we want.
Tam sme slobodní učiť, kedy my chceme.
In the same way, we're free to evangelize if we want, when we want.
Týmto istým spôsobom máme slobodu evanjelizovať, kedy chceme a ak sa nám vtedy chce.
Back in 2014,
v 2014,
9 years ago,
pred 9 rokmi,
we received a message.
Sme dostali posolstvo.
Courtney, what was that message?
Čo to bolo za posolstvo? Courtney.
I asked Courtney because I knew he wouldn't know.
Som vedel, že to nebude vedieť.
Emma brought this subject up a minute ago. What was the issue? Or, no public evangelism.
A téma bola žiadna verejná evanjelizácia.
Said something. Yeah, Courtney wouldn't have known that.
Courtney by to nemohol vedieť.
Which is why I asked him.
Preto som sa ho opýtal.
But he should have known it's related to his statement earlier, so he could have figured it out. 9 years ago, when the message came, no public evangelism,
Keď pred 9 rokmi prišlo posolstvo žiadna verejná evanjelizácia,
Catherine, have a guess what priests in the movement, what their reaction to that message was.
Katrin,
What did they say? What did they think?
hádaj, čo na to povedali kňazi v tomto hnutí.
It's against the thus saith the Lord.
What is against the thus saith the Lord?
To je proti tomu, že takto hovorí
No,
Pán.
more specifically. Brian,
Go out and
who?
the Levites and the
Not to whom?
the world.
Individual priests, you can
Je-
translate now, independent priests
Nezávislí kňazi
were not allowed to talk to anybody.
nemali s nikým hovoriť. Jednotlivci nemali.
People thought no
Ľudci
public
mysleli-
evangelism meant you're not allowed to speak to your
To je
parents
to, čo si ľudia
or your
mysleli.
uncle or your church
Ľudia,
friend.
ľudia si mysleli, že žiadna verejná evanjelizácia znamená nerozprávať sa so svojím priateľom, rodinou o tom vlastne, čo veríme. Tak to ľudia pochopili.
Some people here smiled,
Niektorí sa
said
tu
that.
usmiali, keď som to povedal.
but it took several years to
Trvalo
become balanced.
niekoľko rokov, kým sme sa vyvážili.
So that message was there would be no organized work.
To posolstvo bolo, že nebude žiadna organizovaná práca.
It was never an instruction that individual members could do whatever they wanted to do, say whatever they wanted to say.
To nikdy nebola taká inštrukcia, že tí jednotliví
So
členovia
earlier, Emma
nemôžu
made a
povedať
comment
to, čo chceli. Predtým som povedal poznámku,
that these differing views, these contradictory views about what will happen in the Sunday law,
že tieto také protichodné názory o tom, čo sa stane pri nedeľnom
when it comes
zákone,
to doing a personal work, which I called an independent work, is nothing new. It's not a Sunday law dispensational issue.
Toto nie je nič nové, tieto pohľady na individuálnu prácu. To nie je niečo, čo sa týka epochy. To nie je
It's
niečo
something that
nové.
we've been doing for the past 9 years, speaking to friends, family, individuals.
To je niečo, čo už robíme za posledných 9 rokov. Rozprávame sa s našimi priateľmi, s rodinou. Toto už robíme.
Even people who aren't Adventist, we're allowed to speak to.
Aj ľudia, ktorí sú adventisti, tak s nimi môžeme hovoriť.
So I don't know if that's just a reminder to many of us, it's a reminder. Maybe for some people it's new.
Pre mnohých je to pripomienka, ale možno pre niektorých je to niečo nové.
But that's why I've said that this idea of doing a personal work in the Sunday law history does not qualify as a prophetic phenomena.
A to je dôvod, prečo som povedal, že tento typ práce, takejto individuálnej v nedeľnom zákone, to nie je niečo, čo
It's
nám
not meant to put
proroctvo
a
ukazuje.
stop to people doing work for others.
My vtedy nezastavíme konať tú prácu pre druhých.
Everybody okay? Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to go back to two models.
Takže vrátim sa naspäť k tým dvom modelom.
Either we don't go to the world
Buď nejdeme ku svetu
and somehow or another they will catch the message,
a nejakým spôsobom oni to posolstvo zachytia,
or we do go to the world.
alebo pôjdeme do sveta.
Now, I guess since September last year,
Myslím, že od minulého roka v septembri
I've been speaking about the priests, Levites and Nethinims,
hovoril som o kňazoch, levitoch a netinejcoch
And I focus on the Levites, but not really spoken about the Nethinims.
Zameriaval som sa na Levitov, ale o Netnejcoch som veľmi nehovoril.
So, based upon 3 people,
Na základe 3 ľudí,
Curtis, Brian, and Catherine.
Curtis, Brian a Catherine.
When I say Catherine, I mean what she taught in her second presentation yesterday.
Hovorím teraz, keď poviem Catherine, o tom, čo ona učila na včerajšej prezentácii, na tej druhej.
What you don't know on Zoom, but you can guess,
To vy neviete na Zoome.
is that her hour Zoom presentation
Jej jednohodinová prezentácia na Zoome
was followed, I think, I'm going to say, an hour and a half further discussion.
bola nasledovaná potom 1,5 hodinovou diskusiou.
And it's in the further discussion that she clarified and refined her points.
A tam v tej diskusii potom vyjasnila tie body, ktoré učila.
So you all missed that.
To vy všetci ste o to prišli.
And without knowing what was discussed then,
A bez toho, aby ste vedeli, o čom sa hovorilo,
you won't perhaps be able to answer the question that I'm going to pose now.
možno nebudete vedieť odpovedať teraz na túto moju otázku,
But the people in our little group here will.
ale tí ľudia v tej skupinke tu budú.
So the question is,
Takže otázka je,
we've got Curtis's model and Brian's model.
Máme tu ten model Curtisa a
And
Briana
Catherine said something in her presentation.
a Catherine niečo povedala v tej prezentácii.
My question is, what is the problem with Curtis's model?
Aký je problém s tým Curtisovým modelom?
Because it's a big problem.
Mám veľký problém.
And you must understand what that issue, what his problem, not his problem, what the problem with his model is.
Musíme rozumieť tomu, aký je tam problém.
Even though he might say, well, he got it from me.
Aj keby povedal, že ten model má odo mňa.
Because he made it sound something really good.
Lebo on z toho ako keby urobil niečo, čo vyzerá
Especially when
veľmi
you start
dobre.
talking about spiritual things.
On hovoril o duchovných veciach.
And we might say of Brian's model,
A môžeme o tom Brianovom modeli povedať,
forget Paul,
zabudnite na
one
Pavla.
man did not turn the world upside down, even though it says that. He really didn't.
Jeden človek neotočil svet hore nohami, aj keď to tak vyzerá, ale on to neurobil.
And Brian suggesting 500 of us are going to flip 7 billion people.
Brian hovorí, že keď nás je 500, tak my pretočíme svet hore nohami.
What we understand what flip means. They have to make a decision.
Že budú musieť urobiť rozhodnutie.
Aided and abetted by myself, with my help,
Ja som to sám.
many people in the movement don't believe that can happen now.
Takto. Mnohí v hnutí neveria, že toto by sa mohlo stať.
Because I've sent a chill, I've discouraged people from that crazy idea.
Lebo ja som ľudí nejak tak z tejto myšlienky ich nejako ochladil alebo ich odradil.
And I'm not trying to say it in a joking way. I'm saying he represents a group of people in the movement who don't believe what Curtis has said. And Curtis kind of got that from me.
Takto to vníma Brian a on vlastne reprezentuje viacerých ľudí v hnutí. A to, čo Curtis povedal, mal odo mňa.
I want to answer someone else's question.
Chcem odpovedať na otázku niekoho iného.
Which is related to this, but completely different.
Týka sa to tohto, ale je to niečo iné.
And it's going to give you a bit more time to answer my question about what is the problem with Curtis's model.
Trošku vám to dá viacej času, aby ste odpovedali na to, že aký je problém s tým Curtisovým modelom.
Do you know what the answer to my question is, Catherine? Yeah. Yes? Okay, so Catherine thinks that she's got it, what the issue is. Independent question.
Nezávislá otázka.
My question is, what will happen to the nethonyms
Čo sa stane netinejcom,
that they will not be translated alive at the second advent?
keď oni nebudú vlastne zaživa prenesení pri druhom príchode?
It's a bigger question. It's about Levites and Nethinims.
To je taká väčšia otázka. Kňazi a netinejci, Leviti
It's
a
about
netinejci.
144,000.
Potom je tu 144 000.
And it's about translation
A je to o tom prenesení
for those Nethinims.
Tých netinejcov.
Okay, Catherine, what's the problem with Curtis's model?
Tak, Catherine, skús teraz odpovedať na to, aký je problém s tým Curtisovým modelom.
Because he made it sound really good.
Lebo o neho to znelo také veľmi dobré.
He said, don't worry,
On povedal, nebojte sa,
we can't do the job.
my nevieme robiť tú prácu, Boh ju spraví.
Fair enough. Or you don't. We don't do the job, but it's going to be. They're going to have spiritual evangelism. You say. You said that.
I said that, but I think it misses out because what I suspect the danger is that those other two components that were in the presentation.
Oh, don't give the answer away. Go ahead, Catherine.
The Nethinims, what the Nethinims need is a message about prophecy and reforms.
What the Nethinims need are a message, you said?
To, čo netinejci potrebujú, je posolstvo
on reforms and prophecy. They need a message on reforms and prophecy.
Potrebujú posolstvo ohľadne reforiem a proroctva.
If we are not the one teaching them that, there is no one else.
We're the only people that are able to give them those two components.
A my sme jediní ľudia, ktorí môžu dať tieto dva komponenty.
And our job function is teachers.
And because our job function is teachers, we would be the ones that do that teaching.
A naša rola, naša úloha je vyučovať, čiže my sme tí, ktorí máme učiť.
So I was unfair to Curtis because Curtis already figured that out sometime through this discussion.
Curtisovi som bol neférový, lebo on to už počas tej diskusie si nejak v hlave uvedomil.
But I used his point to bring something to the surface.
Ja som použil tu jeho pointu, aby som niečo ukázal.
I don't know if I've said this privately or publicly.
Neviem už, či som toto povedal súkromne alebo verejne.
Let me ask a question. Is God able to, I'm going to use the term that Curtis used, is God able to do spiritual evangelism?
Je Boh schopný robiť duchovnú evanjelizáciu?
So Curtis said yes.
Curtis povedal áno.
He said, yeah, he's backing out now. And no.
Are you talking dreams and visions?
Yeah, what do you mean by God?
I didn't define what you said. External sources, but those external sources are doing a prophetic message from God.
Že
As
tie,
so we use
teraz
God
ešte
as
prebieha
the
diskusia.
proxies.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he was. I'll do the translation in a minute. He wasn't talking about dreams and visions. He's using proxies like we are. So the definition of spiritual evangelism
Definícia duchovného evanjelizácie
was confined that we, the movement, won't be doing this work, but other human beings will.
hovorí o tom, že my ako hnutie nebudeme robiť túto prácu, ale nejakí iní ľudia budú.
We don't literally do this work, but it's done to the world through literal agents, but it's a spiritual evangelism.
Že my to nerobíme doslovne, ale sú nejakí ako keby agenti vo svete, ktorí to robia. A je to duchovná evangelizácia.
Okay, so now that we're all on the same page, we understand what the problem is.
Rozumieme, čo je ten problém.
Let's summarize. What is the problem with the model that Curtis has presented to us?
Aký je problém, ktorý nám Curtis prezentoval?
Let me break the question down.
Skúsim to rozobrať trošku.
When you're doing evangelism,
Keď evangelizujete,
what are you offering somebody?
čo ponúkate tým ľuďom?
Salvation. So
Spasenie.
I wanted to use another phrase besides salvation,
Chcel som použiť inú frázu,
which is the tool to get to salvation.
a to je ten nástroj, ako ísť ku spaseniu.
When you evangelize,
Keď evangelizujete,
you don't know if they're going to accept or reject.
neviete, či to príjmu alebo odmietnú,
So you have to force them
takže ich musíte nútiť,
to make a decision.
aby sa rozhodli.
And what do we call that, what we're doing? We're
Ako to
giving them
nazývame?
the everlasting gospel.
Večné
So
evanjelium.
without the gospel,
Bez
can a person
evanjelia
be saved?
môže byť človek zachránený?
And when you're doing evangelism,
Keď robíte evangelizáciu,
if I say, oh, come around for a meal,
poď sa k nám najesť, poviem,
the weather's good.
je dobré počasie,
Some introductory thoughts. Is that evangelism?
nejaké dáme im také úvodné myšlienky, je to evangelizácia?
No, there might be tools to break down barriers,
Nie, je to taký nástroj, ako také tie bariéry, ako keby postupne zlámať.
what's the entering wedge for evangelism?
Ale čo je
We all
ten,
know.
taká tá vstupná brána pre evangelizáciu?
Sorry, I have to let me translate. That's why. Health. Yeah, so health, the health message is the entering
To je
wedge.
zdravotné posolstvo, to je tá vstupná brána.
But it's not the gospel, and it's only an introductory part of evangelism.
Nie je to evanjelium, a je to len úvodná časť do toho evanjelia.
And if evangelism remained with the health reform message, would it be of any use?
Keď by evangelizácia zostala len pri zdravotnom posolstve, bolo by to na niečo dobré? Bolo by to nejaký užitok z toho?
Because the end goal is salvation, we've said.
Lebo my hovoríme, že ten cieľ je spasenie.
So the answer is no, it would not be of any use.
Nebolo by to na nič.
So what has been said,
Takže čo sa povedalo?
if we, this movement, don't give the message to the world, to the Nethinims,
Ak my ako hnutie nedáme posolstvo svetu k Netinejcom,
will they understand? I'm going to call it the reform message.
Budú oni rozumieť posolstvu reforiem,
Which is equality.
to je rovnosť, to reformné
Will they
posolstvo je
understand that
rovnosť.
from the world?
Budú tomu oni rozumieť zo sveta?
Well, I'm going to say yes. We've got a couple of different
Máme
answers,
tu
but
rôzne
yes, they can. They
odpovede.
get that from the
Áno,
world.
oni to môžu pochopiť zo sveta,
But it's not sufficient
ale to nestačí
for salvation.
na spasenie.
So if it's not sufficient for salvation,
Ak to nestačí pre spasenie,
is there actually a term, a concept as spiritual evangelism?
je potom nejaký koncept duchovnej evangelizácie?
Brian said we have to do this work.
Brian hovorí, my musíme spraviť túto prácu
No, Brian said we will do this work.
a že ju budeme robiť.
It was Catherine that says we're the only ones that can do this work.
A Katrin povedala, my sme jediní, kto ju môžu robiť.
And Curtis was saying the world will do it
A Curtis hovorí, to urobí svet.
equally well.
Tiež rovnako dobre.
But obviously they can't.
Ale je zrejme, že to oni nemôžu.
So unless we do that work,
Čiže ak my neurobíme túto prácu,
what's the result for the Nephilims, Magda?
čo sa stane netinejcom?
If we don't do the work, what's the result for the Nephilims?
Ak my neurobíme tú prácu,
So that
čo bude
means
s
everyone in the
netinejcami?
world dies.
Zomrú. Celý svet zomrie.
So you said a minute ago she says they can't be saved, and then she shrugged her shoulders when I gave the same question more pointedly.
Najprv povedala, nemôžu byť zachránení a potom tak zúžila ramená, keď som sa ešte raz spýtal, tak určitejšie.
The reason I pointed that out is because we all do that.
My toto robíme všetci, preto o tom hovorím.
And it's good that we do that.
A je to dobré.
When someone presses us, we should pause and be careful about what we're about to say.
Mali by sme,
So it's good that what she did.
keď niekto na nás zatlačí, mali by sme si dať pozor, čo povieme.
Go ahead, Magda.
Ešte raz skús odpovedať.
If we don't do a job,
Magda?
what happens to the Nephilims?
Ak my neurobíme tú našu prácu, čo sa stane s netinejcami?
God usually pays someone who does do the job.
God will find someone to do their job. That's what Curtis said.
Niekoho
And
nájde, aby urobil tú prácu. To hovorí aj Curtis.
And Catherine said there is nobody.
A Katrin hovorí, ale není tu nikto iný.
But it's line of success, so we should do the job.
So it's a what?
Line of success. Success. So we we should do the job. I don't know.
My question was, if we don't do it, what happens?
Ak my to neurobíme, čo sa stane? To je moja otázka.
So we'll be lost.
They will all be lost.
Budú strátení.
I think colloquially we say they all die.
Zomrú.
So this question about translation and the 144,000, it's answered.
Takže potom táto odpoveď na to prenesenie 144 000 už
If we don't do
máme.
this job,
Ak my to neurobíme,
everybody dies.
všetci zomrú.
And if we're talking about the Nephilims, we can just extend that to the Levites as well.
Keď hovoríme o netinejcoch, môžeme to preniesť aj na levitov.
In closing,
V závere,
either we go to the world,
buď pôjdeme do sveta,
not personally, not independently,
Nie
not
osobne.
individually,
nie nezávisle, nie jednotlivo,
but we have a movement initiative,
Ale je tu iniciatíva hnutia,
which means someone has to give the green light that we can now do public evangelism whenever the now is.
niekto nám dá zelenú a povie sa, ideme do verejnej evanjelizácie.
We'll say Sunday law.
Nedeľný zákon. To bude v nedeľnom
Unless that
zákone.
switch or that button is pressed,
Pokiaľ tento ako keby gombík sa nezapne,
everyone dies. There's no hope for them.
všetci zomrú, nie pre ne nádeje.
And them is the Nethinims,
To sú netinejci, tí oni,
and everyone
a každý,
is not 7 billion people.
Tých každých to není 7
Because I'm
biliónov
not
ľudí.
talking about the personal work that you do.
Lebo ja nehovorím o tej osobnej práci, ktorú vy robíte.
And I think many of us, I'm not saying I'm correct necessarily, but I don't think many of us have still conceptualized what that means or how it works.
Myslím, že mnohí z nás stále ešte nevidia ten koncept toho, čo to znamená a ako to funguje.
But it's nothing new.
Ale nie je to nič nové.
This tension has existed for 9 years in our movement.
Toto napätie už 9 rokov existuje v našom
And if you can get it
hnutí.
straight in your mind, you'll understand about the Sunday law, personal work or movement work.
A keď toto sa vám vyjasní, tak pochopíte o nedeľnom zákone osobnom, ako osobnej práci versus práca hnutia.
Personal or movement.
Osobné alebo práca hnutia.
Okay, we'll close this prayer now and we'll continue our discussion later today.
Uzavrieme to s modlitbou a budeme neskôr pokračovať. Poďme sa pomodliť.
Holy God, we thank you.
Svätý Bože, ďakujeme Ti.
It's only as we wrestle one with another,
Keď teraz takto zápasíme jeden s druhým,
like Jacob, we wrestle with you,
ako Jakob s Tebou,
who really was wrestling with himself.
a on bojoval v podstate sám so sebou.
It's only in this struggle,
Je to len v tomto zápase,
the struggle that you have given to us,
tento zápas,
that we can become
ktorý si
the
nám dal,
people of prophecy.
len v tomto zápase sa môžeme stať ľudom proroctva.
May each of us come to a clearer understanding of the truth.
Nech každý z nás príde k jasnejšiemu porozumeniu pravdy.
As we see time running away from us.
Keď vidíme, ako ten čas nám uteká.
In Jesus' name,
V
amen.
mene Ježiša. Amen.